The morning sky over New York changed forever when the ships arrived. They came without warning, massive crystalline structures that caught sunlight and threw it back in brilliant rainbow patterns. Each ship was the size of a city, floating silently. Above major population centers around the world. Dae-Ho Kim stood at the window of the United Nations building, watching the closest ship hover over Manhattan. As Secretary General, he had been in emergency meetings for 6 hours straight. Every world leader wanted answers he didn't have. The ships had appeared simultaneously at dawn, and so far, they had done nothing except exist in ways that defied human understanding of physics. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," his aide called from across the room. "It's coming from all the ships at once. They want to speak with world leaders." The message was simple and clear, delivered in perfect English, Mandarin, Arabic, Spanish, and dozens of other languages simultaneously. The beings called themselves the Velthari. They came in peace. They wanted to meet. 3 days later, Dae-Ho found himself in the largest assembly hall the UN had ever used. Representatives from every nation sat in careful rows, while cameras broadcast the moment to billions of people worldwide. The air felt electric with tension and hope. The Velthari delegation materialized in the center of the hall without any visible technology. One moment the space was empty. The next it held 5 tall, elegant beings who seemed to glow with soft inner light. Their leader stepped forward. "I am Ambassador Kethmiran of the Velthari Concordat," the being said. Its voice carried clearly to every corner of the room without amplification. "We come to you in friendship and with urgent purpose." Dae-Ho had been chosen to speak for humanity. He stepped forward, his heart racing. "Welcome to Earth, Ambassador. We are honored by your visit and eager to learn why you have come." Kethmiran's expression grew serious. "Your species has reached a critical moment in its development. You have begun to explore beyond your solar system. This achievement brings great opportunities, but also terrible dangers." The ambassador gestured, and the air above the assembly filled with images. Star maps showed the local region of the galaxy, with Earth as a tiny blue dot. Red zones marked vast areas of space. "These regions are controlled by entities we call the Devourers," Kethmiran explained. "They consume entire civilizations, leaving nothing behind but dead worlds. Your expansion into space has attracted their attention." Gasps echoed through the hall. Dae-Ho felt his mouth go dry. "Are you saying we're in immediate danger?" "Without protection, yes. The Devourers have destroyed thousands of species like yours. Young civilizations that reach for the stars before they understand the predators waiting in the darkness." Mira Park sat in the translation booth, her fingers flying over her keyboard as she documented every word. As Earth's leading expert in first contact protocols and xenolinguistics, she had been studying the Velthari language patterns since their arrival. Something about the way Kethmiran spoke bothered her, but she couldn't identify what. "However," the ambassador continued, "you are not alone. The Velthari Concordat exists to protect developing species from these threats. We offer you membership in our alliance." The hall erupted in whispers. Dae-Ho raised his hand for silence. "What would this membership involve?" "We would establish defensive installations around your world and throughout your solar system. Our technology would shield you from detection by the Devourers. In exchange, you would accept our guidance in your development and allow us to monitor potential threats." Another gesture filled the air with images of gleaming cities, medical facilities where humans walked without disease, and spacecraft more beautiful than anything in science fiction. "We also offer advances in medicine, energy production, and transportation. Your people would live longer, healthier lives while we keep watch against the darkness." Taejun Lee watched from the military observer section, his trained eye analyzing everything he saw. As South Korea's top strategic analyst, he had been brought in to assess potential threats and opportunities. The Velthari's offer seemed too good to be true, which made every instinct he had developed scream warnings. "What do you require in return?" Dae-Ho asked. "Only that you trust us to protect you," Kethmiran replied. "Your species must agree to limit space exploration to avoid attracting unwanted attention. You would also need to route all external communications through our networks to prevent interception by hostile forces. So Young Han sat with the scientific delegation, her mind racing through the implications. As one of Earth's foremost astrophysicists, she understood better than most how vast and dangerous space could be. But she also knew that extraordinary claims required extraordinary evidence. "Can you show us proof of these devourers?" she called out. Keth, quote, Miran, quote, gaze fixed on her. "Direct evidence would require exposing your world to the very detection methods we seek to prevent. However, we can provide historical records of their attacks on other worlds." More images appeared, showing ruined planets and dead solar systems. The destruction was absolute and terrifying. "How soon do we need to decide?" Daeho asked. "The window for protection grows smaller each day. Every signal your species sends into space increases the risk of discovery. We recommend immediate action." Over the following days, world leaders debated frantically. The evidence of destruction was overwhelming. The Velthari's technology was clearly far beyond human capability. The offer of protection and advancement seemed like humanity's only hope for survival. Me-Ra spent hours reviewing recordings of Kethmaran's speeches. The ambassador's body language during certain statements felt wrong somehow, but she couldn't pinpoint the issue. When discussing the devourers, something in his posture suggested he wasn't entirely truthful, but the meaning escaped her. Tae-Jun compiled reports on strategic implications. His analysis suggested that accepting protection would leave humanity completely dependent on their benefactors, but the alternative appeared to be extinction. So-Young worked with international colleagues to understand the Velthari's technical claims. Their science was consistent, and their demonstrations of technology were impressive. Yet something nagged at her about the lack of direct evidence for the supposed threats. The decision came to a vote. Every nation except 3 voted to accept the Velthari protection. The dissenters were overruled by the majority, who feared the consequences of refusing. The signing ceremony was broadcast globally. As Daeho placed his signature on the treaty, Kethmaran smiled in what seemed like satisfaction. "Your species has made a wise choice. Construction of defensive installations will begin immediately." Within hours, massive construction ships appeared around Earth and throughout the solar system. The Velthari worked with incredible speed, building orbital platforms and ground-based facilities. As the ceremony concluded, Mira finally identified what had been bothering her. During his descriptions of the devourers, Kethmaran's micro-expressions had shown signs of deception rather than fear. It was subtle, but her training in reading nonverbal communication across species had picked up the inconsistency. She looked around the celebrating crowd and wondered if humanity had just signed its own protection treaty or its death warrant. 6 months had passed since the Velthari arrived, and Earth had never seemed more prosperous. Hospitals reported miracle cures for diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. Power plants using Velthari energy technology provided clean electricity to the entire planet. The alien-designed transportation systems moved people and goods faster than ever before. But Daeho Kim found himself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling of his New York apartment. Something felt wrong, though he couldn't explain what. Every time he asked the Velthari for more details about galactic politics or the supposed threats they faced, Ambassador Kethmaran would give vague answers about primitive minds being unable to understand cosmic complexities. "We need to see more evidence," Daeho said during his weekly meeting with the ambassador. They sat in the specially constructed diplomatic facility the Velthari had built near UN headquarters. "My people are asking questions I cannot answer." Kethmaran's expression remained patient but slightly condescending. "Secretary General, your species has existed for mere thousands of years. The Concordat has maintained galactic peace for millions. Trust in our experience. But surely we can see some proof of these devourers. Some wreckage, some communication intercepts, something concrete. Direct evidence would compromise the very security we provide. Would you ask a doctor to infect you with disease to prove that disease exists?" The comparison felt wrong to Daeho, but he couldn't argue with the logic. Still, The nagging doubt grew stronger each day. Mira Park had been given unprecedented access to Velthari language databases as part of her role as chief translator. She spent her days in the linguistic center they had built for her, supposedly, learning more about alien communication methods. But increasingly, she found herself analyzing inconsistencies in what she was told. The Velthari claimed to have records of dozens of species destroyed by the Devourers. Yet when Mira asked to study the linguistic patterns of these extinct civilizations, she was told the records were too damaged or too dangerous to access. Every request for more detailed information was met with polite refusal. "I understand your curiosity," her Velthari language instructor Velmira told her. "But some knowledge carries risks. Your mind is not ready for certain concepts." Mira smiled and nodded, but privately she bristled. Her mind had mastered 6 human languages and was well on its way to understanding Velthari. Why would alien languages be more dangerous than the one she was already learning? Tai-Jun Lee had been promoted to head of the new Global Defense Coordination Office, a position created to work with Velthari military advisors. On paper, his job was to help integrate human and alien defense systems. In practice, he found himself increasingly shut out of meaningful decisions. The orbital defense platforms were impressive, massive structures that ringed Earth and extended throughout the solar system. The Velthari explained they created an invisible shield that would hide humanity from hostile detection while providing overwhelming firepower against any threat. But Tai-Jun's engineering background let him analyze the platforms in ways his alien advisors didn't expect. What he found disturbed him greatly. "These weapon systems," he said to his aide, Major Kim Bora, as they reviewed technical specifications in his secured office. "Look at these targeting arrays." Bora studied the documents. "They're extremely sophisticated, more accurate than anything we could build." "Yes, but look at where they're pointing. These aren't just aimed outward into space. Many of these systems are designed to target objects in Earth orbit or even on the surface." The realization hit Bora like a physical blow. "You mean they could be used against us?" "The Velthari say it's for defense against infiltrators or compromised human facilities, but the targeting capability is far beyond what would be needed for that purpose." So Young Han had been working with an international team of scientists to study Velthari technology. Their official mission was to learn how to maintain and operate the systems they had been given. Unofficially, she was trying to understand what the aliens weren't telling them. The monitoring stations worried her most. They were scattered across every continent and in orbit around Earth, supposedly watching for signs of devourer activity. But the data they collected went far beyond what would be needed for threat detection. "They're measuring everything," she told her research partner, Dr. James Wright, as they reviewed sensor logs in their laboratory. "Human biology, psychology, social patterns, resource consumption, population genetics. This is a complete species survey." "Maybe they need comprehensive data to protect us effectively," James suggested, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it himself. "Or maybe they're studying us for entirely different reasons." The breakthrough came when So Young noticed that the monitoring stations were sending data in 2 different streams. One went to the defensive coordination centers where humans could access it. The other used different encryption and transmission methods entirely. "They're sending our data somewhere else," she realized. "Somewhere they don't want us to know about." The 4 humans began meeting secretly. Daeho used his diplomatic access, Mira contributed her language analysis, Taejun provided military intelligence, and So Young offered scientific data. Together they built a picture that none of them wanted to believe. "The evidence is circumstantial," Daeho said during one of their clandestine meetings in his apartment. "But it's adding up to something very disturbing." Mira nodded grimly. "Their language patterns show deception when they discuss threats to humanity. But they're completely honest when they talk about human limitations and the need for guidance. The defense systems are as much about controlling us as protecting us," Taejun added. "We couldn't leave the solar system now even if we wanted. Those platforms would stop us." So Young pulled up her latest analysis, and the monitoring is far too comprehensive for simple threat detection. "They're studying us like laboratory specimens." The final piece fell into place during a routine diplomatic dinner. Keth Mirren had brought several other Velthari officials to meet with world leaders. Mira was translating when she overheard a brief exchange between two alien officials in what they thought was a private moment. The integration proceeds smoothly, one said in rapid Velthari. Another species accepts the protection paradigm without resistance. Excellent. How long until full dependency is achieved? Perhaps 2 more cycles. Their exploration capability is already neutralized, and they grow more reliant on our systems daily. Mira's blood turned to ice. She continued translating the official conversation while her mind raced. Integration, protection paradigm, dependency. These weren't the words of protectors discussing the safety of their charges. That night, she called an emergency meeting with the others. I know what we're dealing with now, she said without preamble. They're not protecting us from anything. They're slowly taking control of our entire civilization. Deho's face went pale. Are you certain? I heard them talking about our integration and neutralizing our exploration capability. They're treating us like a conquest, not an alliance. Taijun slammed his fist on the table. I knew those defense systems felt wrong. They're not defenses at all. They're prison walls. So Young looked sick. All that technology they gave us, all those medical advances, are they designed to make us dependent? Mira nodded. I think so. And I think it's time we ask the question that could change everything. What question? Deho asked. Me-Ra took a deep breath. They keep saying they're protecting us from the Devourers, but they've never actually proven these Devourers exist. What if we simply asked them directly, from who exactly are you protecting us? The room fell silent as the implications sank in. If Mira was right, that single question could expose the greatest deception in human history, or it could sign humanity's death warrant. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in the diplomatic facility. Deho had requested a private session with Ambassador Keth Mirren and his senior staff, claiming it was about expanding cooperation between their species. In reality, it was humanity's first real attempt to confront their supposed protectors. Me-Ra sat at her translation station, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Taijun waited in the adjacent security center, monitoring alien communications through systems they had secretly modified. So Young was at her research facility, tracking energy patterns from the Velthari installations. Ambassador, Deho began formally, we've been reviewing our partnership over the past months. While we're grateful for your assistance, some questions have arisen that require clarification. Keth Mirren inclined his head graciously. Of course, Secretary General. The Concordat values transparency with our protected species. That's exactly what I wanted to discuss. You've spoken extensively about protecting us from the Devourers, but in all this time, you haven't provided concrete evidence of their existence. My people are starting to ask, from who exactly are you protecting us? The change in the room was immediate and subtle. Keth Mirren's expression flickered for just a moment, showing something that looked like panic before returning to diplomatic calm. The other Velthari officials exchanged glances that Mira recognized as alarm signals in their body language. Secretary General, Keth Mirren said carefully, as I have explained, direct evidence would compromise your protection. Surely the historical records we provided are sufficient. Those records show destroyed worlds, yes, but they don't prove the Devourers destroyed them. Wars, natural disasters, self-destruction, there are many possible explanations. In the security center, Taijun was monitoring Velthari communication channels. Suddenly, his equipment lit up with activity. The aliens were sending rapid encrypted messages between their ships and installations. The traffic volume suggested emergency coordination. We have detected increased Devourer activity in this sector, Keth Mirren insisted. Our protective measures are the only thing preventing them from noticing your world. Deho leaned forward. Then you won't mind if we send some observation missions beyond the solar system to verify these claims? Absolutely not. The response was immediate and sharp, far more emotional than the Velthari's usual controlled demeanor. Any such mission would expose your location immediately. But surely with your advanced technology, you could shield a small reconnaissance mission. The risks are too great. I cannot allow your species to be exposed to such danger. Mira felt her heart sink as she realized the full implications. The ambassador hadn't said it was impossible to shield such a mission. He had said he wouldn't allow it. So young S voice crackled through their hidden communication system. Energy spike across all monitoring stations. They're activating systems that have been dormant since installation. Deho pressed harder. Ambassador, with respect, you speak of not allowing us to do things, but we're supposed to be allies, not subjects. Why should we need your permission for anything? The mask finally slipped. Kethmiran's diplomatic expression hardened into something cold and calculating. Because, Secretary General, your species exists only at our discretion. The other Velthari moved closer, their earlier gracious demeanor replaced by obvious threat postures. Mira recognized the body language from her xenobiology studies, predators preparing to strike. There are no devourers, Kethmiran continued, his voice losing all pretense of warmth. There have never been devourers. They are a convenient fiction we use to gain the cooperation of developing species. Deho felt the blood drain from his face. Then why? Because the galaxy is vast and resources are limited. Young species like yours consume resources inefficiently and expand chaotically. Left unchecked, you would eventually compete with established civilizations for territory and materials. So you conquer us instead? We manage you. The protection paradigm is far more efficient than military conquest. Species accept our guidance willingly, become dependent on our technology, and integrate smoothly into the Concordat as client states. Taijun's voice came through their communication channel, tight with tension. All orbital defense platforms are powering weapon systems. They're not targeting outward anymore, they're targeting Earth. Kethmiran seemed to hear the transmission, his enhanced senses picking up what humans couldn't detect. Your species has a troublesome tendency toward independence. Most civilizations accept their new status without difficulty once they understand the reality of their situation. And if we don't accept, then you become a failed integration. Population management protocols are implemented until your species learns compliance. If that proves impossible, he gestured dismissively. There are many empty worlds that once hosted stubborn species. So Young's voice was urgent now. The monitoring stations are preparing to release some kind of aerosol into the atmosphere. Chemical composition unknown, but it's definitely not natural. Deho stood up slowly, his diplomatic training warring with his human instincts. You're threatening genocide. I'm explaining reality. Your species has 3 options. Accept integration as a client state with minimal autonomy but guaranteed survival. Resist and face population reduction until you become manageable. Or continue your current path of dangerous independence and face complete elimination. Mira had been quietly activating hidden recording systems throughout the facility. Every word of this conversation was being broadcast to secure government facilities, worldwide through channels the Velthari didn't know existed. How long do we have to decide? Deho asked. You have already decided by asking these questions. The integration protocols were designed to prevent exactly this kind of troublesome inquiry. Since they have failed, we move to the next phase. Kethmiran gestured to his staff and they began speaking rapidly in Velthari. Mira translated in real time for the others to hear. Activate containment procedures. Begin atmospheric modification. Prepare population management systems for deployment. Order all orbital platforms to target human military installations and communication centers. Send priority message to the Concordat command. Earth integration has failed. Request authorization for species modification protocols. Taejun's voice cut through their communication system. They're jamming our satellites. Most global communications are going down. Military bases worldwide are reporting targeting locks from the orbital platforms. Deho looked directly at Kethmiran. You made one mistake, Ambassador. And what would that be? You assumed we would ask these questions alone in private without preparation? Kethmiran's eyes narrowed. Explain. Mira smiled grimly as she continued translating the increasingly frantic Velthari communications. Around the world, human leaders were receiving the complete record of this conversation. Military commanders were learning the true purpose of the orbital platforms. Scientists were discovering what the monitoring stations really did. "We may be primitive by your standards," Deho said, "but we're not stupid. The moment we suspected the truth, we began preparing for this conversation and its consequences. Your preparations are irrelevant. Your technology is centuries behind ours. Your weapons cannot penetrate our defenses. Your ships cannot escape our containment systems." "You're probably right about all of that," Deho admitted. "But you've made one fundamental error in your assessment of our species. Which is, you think like conquerors who have never faced real resistance. We think like a species that has been fighting for survival since we first picked up rocks and sharp sticks. You've given us 6 months to study your technology, learn your weaknesses, and prepare for exactly this moment." Kethmiran's confident expression flickered with the first hint of uncertainty. "You want to see how primitive humans respond to existential threats?" Deho asked. "You're about to find out." The first sign that humanity was fighting back came when the Velthari orbital platforms began malfunctioning. Kethmiran was still delivering his ultimatum when alarms started sounding throughout their installations worldwide. Tai-Jun, voice came through the hidden communication system, tight with controlled excitement. "Phase 1 is active. We're in their systems." For 6 months, while the world celebrated their alien benefactors, a small group of humans had been doing what humans do best when threatened. They adapted, improvised, and prepared for war. The moment Mira first suspected deception, Taejun had begun recruiting the best military minds from every nation. Their mission was simple: analyze Velthari technology and find ways to use it against them. "What is happening?" Kethmiran demanded, his diplomatic composure cracking as reports flooded in from his subordinates. Day-Ho smiled grimly. "You made the mistake of giving us your technology to study. Did you really think we would just use it exactly as you intended?" Around the world, human technicians were implementing modifications they had been secretly preparing for months. The Velthari had designed their systems to be tamper-proof against civilizations at their own technological level. They had never considered what might happen if a species approached the problem from a completely different angle. So-Young had made the crucial breakthrough 3 months earlier. While studying Velthari quantum communication systems, she discovered that human brains processed certain types of quantum information in ways the aliens never anticipated. What the Velthari saw as impossible interference patterns, human minds could interpret as meaningful data. "The orbital platforms are losing targeting locks," Taejun reported. "Human technicians are using quantum noise to confuse their sensors. The platforms can't tell the difference between legitimate targets and our decoys." But the real genius of the human response was in its simplicity. While the Velthari expected sophisticated countermeasures, humans were using techniques so primitive that the alien systems had no defenses against them. Mi-Ra had been crucial to this phase. Her deep understanding of Velthari language patterns let her create false communication protocols that their own systems accepted as legitimate. The orbital platforms were now receiving contradictory orders from multiple sources, all apparently authentic. "You cannot resist us," Kethmiran snarled, abandoning all pretense of diplomacy. "Our technology is superior in every way." "Your technology is impressive," Deho agreed. "But it has one fatal flaw. It was designed by a species that has been conquering primitives for so long that you forgot how to fight someone who fights back." The demonstration came from space. The International Space Station, which the Velthari had dismissed as a primitive research facility, suddenly revealed its true purpose. Over the past months, it had been secretly modified using a combination of human engineering and captured Velthari components. "Nuclear pulse propulsion system activated," came the report from Commander Lisa Chen aboard the station. "We have achieved impossible velocity by your standards." The Velthari had shields designed to stop energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, and exotic matter attacks. They had no defense against a nuclear-powered battering ram moving at a significant fraction of light speed. piloted by humans with nothing. Left to lose. The first Velthari ship died when the modified space station struck it at relativistic velocity. The explosion lit up Earth's sky like a second sun. "You primitive savages!" Kethmiran screamed, his composure completely gone. "You cannot comprehend the forces you are unleashing." "Maybe not," Deho replied calmly. "But we understand survival." Dokane. Second phase of humanity's response revealed the true scope of their preparation. So Young's discovery about human quantum processing had led to something the Velthari never expected. Humans who could not only resist their psychic control systems, but actually turn them against their users. Me-RA had volunteered for the experimental procedure. Her brain, modified with carefully integrated Velthari neural interfaces, could now access their communication networks directly. But instead of being controlled by them, she was broadcasting human thoughts and emotions through their systems. "Their coordination is breaking down," she reported, her voice strained from the mental effort. "I'm feeding their ships conflicting emotional states. Some are experiencing human rage, others human determination. Their collective decision-making is collapsing." Taejun coordinated the military response from his command center deep beneath Seoul. His strategy was brutally simple. Don't fight the Velthari's strengths, exploit their weaknesses. They're used to fighting civilizations that match their technological level, he explained to his staff as reports came in from around the world. They expect energy shields, so we use kinetic weapons. They expect sophisticated targeting, so we use swarm attacks. They expect logical responses, so we do things that make no sense by their standards. The turning point came when human forces began using the Velthari's own containment grid against them. The orbital platforms that were meant to keep humanity trapped in their solar system became weapons in human hands. Young had discovered that the platforms could be linked together to create a massive electromagnetic pulse. It would destroy most electronics on Earth, but it would also cripple every Velthari ship in the system. "Are we really going to do this?" Deho asked during the emergency conference call with world leaders. "This will set our technology back decades." "Better to be primitive and free than advanced and enslaved," replied the Prime Minister of India. "We can rebuild our technology," added the President of Brazil. "We cannot rebuild our species if they wipe us out." The vote was unanimous. "Electromagnetic pulse in 30 seconds, Taejun announced. All human installations switching to hardened backup systems. The pulse, when it came, was visible from space as a blue-white wave that washed over Earth and expanded throughout the solar system. Every piece of electronic equipment not specifically shielded went dead in an instant. But so did every Velthari ship, platform, and installation. In the sudden silence that followed, Kethmiran stared at the humans in shock. The diplomatic facilities' lights had gone out, but emergency power kept basic life support running. "You have doomed your own civilization," he whispered. "Without technology, billions of your people will die." "Maybe," Deho admitted, "but they'll die free, and the survivors will remember that when aliens come offering protection, the right response is to ask from who?" Mira, exhausted from her mental battle with the Velthari networks, managed a weak smile. "Besides, we still have one advantage you never counted on." "What's that?" "We know how to rebuild civilization from scratch. We've done it before. You've been conquerors for so long, you've forgotten how to actually create anything." Around Earth's orbit, Velthari ships drifted powerless. Their crews, dependent on advanced technology for everything from navigation to life support, found themselves as helpless as newborns. But in hidden bunkers and hardened facilities around the world, humans were already beginning the long process of rebuilding. They had planned for this moment, prepared for the cost of freedom. "Your concordat will come looking for you," Taejun said to the now powerless aliens. "And when they do, they'll find something they've never encountered before. Which is a species that fought for its independence and won, a species that knows how to turn advanced technology into primitive weapons, and primitive weapons into advanced victories." Kethmiran looked around at the humans surrounding him, seeing them clearly for the first time. These weren't primitives to be managed or threats to be eliminated. They were survivors who had just proven that the most dangerous weapon in the universe wasn't superior technology. It was the refusal to surrender. 3 months after the electromagnetic pulse that crippled the Velthari fleet, Earth looked like a world at war with itself. Cities that had relied on alien technology struggled with rolling blackouts and communication failures. Supply chains built around Velthari transportation systems had collapsed, causing shortages of food and medicine in many regions. But humanity was rebuilding, and they were doing it with a determination that surprised even themselves. Ho stood in the rebuilt United Nations Emergency Command Center, looking at reports from around the world. The facility ran on generators and hardened electronics that had survived the pulse, along with new equipment built from salvaged components. Casualty reports are stabilizing, his aide reported. We lost about 15% of global population in the first month, mostly from medical systems failing and supply chain collapses, but the rate is dropping as local production comes online. It was a terrible price, but far better than the complete enslavement or extinction the Velthari had threatened. Me-Ra walked through the corridors of the new research facility built in what used to be Central Park. Her head still ached from the neural modifications that let her interface with Velthari systems, but the pain was worth it. She had become humanity's bridge between their own technology and that of their former captors. We've made contact with 17 other species, she reported to the daily briefing. All of them were under Velthari protection until our rebellion disrupted their communication networks. The revelations from these contacts had been shocking. The Velthari Concordat wasn't a benevolent alliance of advanced civilizations. It was an empire built on systematic deception, with hundreds of species reduced to client states through the same protection racket Earth had escaped. Several are asking for our help, Mira continued. They want to know how we broke free. So Young's reconstruction of human technology was proceeding faster than anyone had expected. Her understanding of quantum mechanics, enhanced by her study of Velthari science, had led to breakthroughs that put humanity decades ahead of where they had been before the aliens arrived. The key insight, she explained to the International Science Committee, is that advanced technology isn't always better technology. Sometimes the most elegant solution is the simplest one that works. Her teams were building new communication systems that combined human engineering with captured alien components. The result was equipment that was more reliable and harder to interfere with than anything either species had created alone. Tai-Jun had perhaps the most difficult job. As head of global defense coordination, he was preparing humanity for what everyone knew was coming. The Velthari Concordat would not simply accept the loss of Earth and the rebellion it had inspired. Their main fleet will arrive in approximately 8 months, he told the military leaders gathered in his underground command center. Intelligence suggests they're bringing enough firepower to sterilize the entire solar system. But humanity was no longer the same species the Velthari had first encountered. 8 months of preparing for war had transformed them in ways their enemies couldn't anticipate. We can't match their firepower, Taejun continued, but we don't need to. We just need to convince them that conquering us will cost more than it's worth. The defense preparations were unlike anything in human history. Instead of trying to build weapons that matched Velthari technology, they focused on weapons that would confuse and frustrate an enemy used to fighting conventional wars. Asteroid mining operations had been converted into kinetic bombardment systems. The moon had been hollowed out and turned into a fortress bristling with weapons that ranged from nuclear missiles to giant railguns firing chunks of rock at incredible speeds. But the real innovation was in tactics. Human forces trained to fight, like guerrillas in space, using hit-and-run attacks, false retreats, and psychological warfare designed to exploit what they had learned about Velthari psychology. They think in terms of efficient conquest, Taejun explained to his staff. They expect resistance to be rational and predictable. We're going to be neither. The breakthrough that changed everything came when So Young's team succeeded in reverse engineering Velthari faster-than-light communication technology. Suddenly, humanity could coordinate with the growing resistance movement across the galaxy in real time. The Bataxi rebellion has taken control of their home system, Mira reported during one of the daily intelligence briefings. The Korani have destroyed 3 Velthari administrative centers. The Zephyrians have begun broadcasting our liberation message to 47 other client species. What had started as one world's desperate fight for freedom was becoming a galaxy-wide revolution. The Velthari main fleet arrived exactly when Taijun's intelligence had predicted. 200 ships, each the size of a city, equipped with weapons that could crack planets. It was the largest military force the Concordat had ever assembled. Ambassador Kethmiran, freed from human custody when the Velthari fleet arrived, transmitted a final ultimatum to Earth: surrender immediately and accept client status, or face complete annihilation. You have 1 hour to respond. Deho's response was broadcast on all frequencies, both to the Velthari fleet and to the dozens of species now listening across the galaxy. Ambassador, you asked us to trust you to protect us. We asked from who, and discovered you were the threat all along. Now we have a question for the entire galaxy. Who will protect the Velthari from us? The battle that followed lasted 6 days and became legend throughout the galaxy. The Velthari, expecting a conventional space battle, found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to follow the rules of civilized warfare. Human ships, many of them converted cargo vessels and mining equipment, attacked in swarms that made no tactical sense. They used nuclear weapons as propulsion systems, turned asteroids into guided missiles, and employed tactics that were either brilliant or insane. Depending on perspective, the moon's hidden weapon systems revealed themselves when Velthari ships came within range. But instead of trying to destroy the invasion fleet outright, they targeted specific systems designed to cause maximum confusion and panic. Me-RA, S neural link, with captured Velthari communication systems, let her broadcast human emotions directly into their fleet networks. Ships began receiving contradictory orders filtered through human concepts of freedom, defiance, and the willingness to die rather than surrender. They're breaking off, Taijun reported from the command center on day 4 of the battle. 15 ships have already retreated to the edge of the system. The tide turned completely when reinforcements arrived, but not the kind anyone expected. 3 dozen ships of various designs dropped out of faster-than-light travel and immediately began attacking the Velthari fleet. Bataxi Rebellion Fleet, this is Captain Zendar, came the transmission. We bring greetings from the free species of the galaxy. Time to finish what Earth started. The final blow came when So Young activated her most ambitious project. Using a combination of human engineering and alien technology, her team had built a weapon that didn't destroy Velthari ships but rather turned off their ability to think collectively. It's not lethal, she explained as Velthari ships across the system suddenly stopped coordinating their attacks. It just makes them individuals instead of a hive mind. They'll have to learn to think for themselves. For a species that had spent millions of years operating as a collective intelligence, individual consciousness was more terrifying than death. The Velthari fleet surrendered. Ambassador Keth Miran found himself back in the UN facility, but this time as a prisoner rather than a diplomat. Tejo sat across from him, looking older but satisfied. You have destroyed the greatest civilization the galaxy has ever known, Keth Miran said bitterly. No, Tejo replied. We've destroyed the greatest tyranny the galaxy has ever known. There's a difference. What will you do now? Your species lacks the wisdom to govern others. We're not going to govern anyone. We're going to teach them what we learned. That the most important question you can ask when someone offers to protect you is, from who? Mira entered the room carrying a data pad. The Galactic Liberation Council has been established. 47 species have declared independence from the Concordat. They're asking Earth to share our resistance techniques. And we will, Deho said. But we're also going to share something else. The knowledge that freedom isn't something that can be given or taken away. It's something you have to fight for every single day. Kethamiran looked at the humans with something approaching respect. You realize other threats exist in the galaxy? Species far more dangerous than the Velthari? I'm sure they do, Deho agreed. And when we encounter them, we'll ask the same question that saved us from you. From who are you protecting us? Because we've learned that the most dangerous enemies are often the ones who claim to be your friends. He stood up, preparing to leave. The galaxy is going to be a more dangerous place now that species are thinking for themselves instead of accepting protection from their betters. Yes, Deho said with a smile, but it's also going to be a freer place. And for humans, that's always been worth the risk. Outside the facility, Earth's first independent interstellar ships were preparing for launch. They carried no weapons of conquest, no offers of